Well, hello again. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Hey, Scott. I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I am. I'm doing really well, actually, despite the continuation of the oppression that exists here in Pennsylvania. Did I say oppression? Gosh, sometimes things just come out of my mouth. No, but I just want to welcome anybody else who might be watching again. This is a jolly little webcast that we do called Solid Ground, because really the best ground to be on is solid ground. Nobody wants to be on some kind of rocky foundation, we try to get or sand, and so we try to get to the heart of things through just discussion. Mike and I have been friends for a long time, and we think that our discussions are really interesting, and I guess the jury might be out as to whether or not anybody else does. But I will say real quickly, last week's topic definitely brought some people out of the woodwork. It's which of course I love. I love kind of being in conversations with people and just throwing in something to kind of stir the pot. And that's exactly what happened. And I've had some great conversations with people that I have not talked to in a long time because they happen to watch it and to listen to it. So that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, just a real quick who I am. My name is Scott. I'm a youth minister, although I'm an architect by degree. And so I still do both, but primarily I work in a parish grouping where I'm in charge of high school and middle school ministry for 3 parishes. And I also have 8 children and 1 wife. And it is a fantastic...
Thanks for that clarification.
It's a fantastic adventure. Every day is an adventure. It's not one that I ever maybe envisioned for myself, but that's the way it's worked out. And so that's kind of me. I like to have a good time. I don't take myself too seriously, I don't think. And so, I just I love people. I love talking to people. I love learning about people, and I love talking about issues. I'm not a scholar, but I just love trying to get to the heart of things and just for my own personal growth. So anyway, that's me. Who are you, Mike? Who are you?
Yeah. So I'm Mike. Dr. Michael Therrien. I'm married to Lynn, have 4 children, and I take myself way too seriously. And I don't wear the same T-shirt every week like Scott does.
Yeah. By the way, is there a donation button down here?
Yeah, right.
Donate to the Scott Lieb clothing fund.
You can have another. Yeah, but I'm a moral theologian by training, and so. A lot of people call economics the dismal science, but I think moral theology is truly the dismal science. It seems to always be bad news for everybody, but I don't see it that way. I think moral theology is fascinating because we get to discuss all these, kind of interesting and yet controversial things.
Yes.
So, so that's sort of my passion. I run an organization called Preambula Group, which you'll see, up in that upper corner. Yeah.
That's hard. That's hard.
Yes. So you should visit our website and see what we do.
There you go.
Yeah. So anyhow, I'm going to kind of lead off this topic, which is you have 8 children.
I do.
Why would you ever have 8 kids? So I want to talk about this. And one of the, when we first met, you had 1.
Is that right? I only had 1?
Maybe you had 2. You had Grace. Elsa. That's right. Because Elsa was she was the baby, and then Grace was maybe 2.
Notice that her name is Elsa, and she was born years before Frozen. We're a trend-setting family.
Oh my gosh, you are, and you were trendy then. I remember seeing Becky. Becky, you guys had just moved back from Denver, and she had the short little hair with the little the little 8-year-old clips. Remember that was popular? The little
not a bobby pin, but a barrette. Yeah. Like she had a
barrette.
Cute barrette.
Yeah, it was a little butterfly one. And I was like, oh gosh, they're so trendy from the West Coast. I grew up in Seattle, so I felt right at home. We were out in New Florence, Pennsylvania, in the middle of just about nowhere. But looking for a house. Anyhow, but I've watched your family grow, it keeps growing. It just grew again just last year. You had little Margaret, and so you have all these kids, and so I thought it would be just really interesting for you to talk to us a little bit about that. Like, what's it like having 8 children, especially in the world today? And why don't we just start there? Like, describe kind of like what it's like to have a family with 10 people living under the same roof.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I would say, first of all, I'm a little bit less afraid of that, or less shy about that, because I myself was the third of 11 children. So the large kind of family dynamic is not a foreign thing to me. And so there was never necessarily a part of me that was scared to have a large family. My existence growing up with my brothers and sisters was fantastic. I mean, we had, of course, the fights and the disagreements and things like that happened along the way. But I just come from a family where that family bond is one of the most important things. We have each other's backs. We all know each other. We all get along with each other. We still get together. The whole entire family does twice a year. And it's just always a fun experience. So I had no idea how many kids that I would have. But now that I do have 8 children, it is, like I said, it's kind of this wild adventure, and it's very, very different from day to day. I think one of the things that Becky and I do is try to establish as many routines as we possibly can to have some type of consistency from day to day. But I mean, you're talking about 8 kids who have 8 different personalities, ranging from super social butterflies to like shy little, very sensitive personalities. And so trying to manage and juggle those, all I can say is that it's a daily adventure. It's a daily adventure.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you're used to this. Was Becky used to this?
No, she has 2 sisters, one who is like 14 or 15 years older, and then she was born, and then her younger sister is like less than 2 years younger than her. So it was almost like they had this dynamic in their family where her older sister could have been an aunt or something like that. And kind of like helped raise her, I guess, in a sense. She was old enough that she sort of took care of Becky and her younger sister. And so she was really primarily close to her younger sister. But it was 3 girls. They were the spacing out of the age between them almost made it like there was only just 2 girls. And so she was really scared whenever she first met my family, because she had no idea what to expect. I mean, she came in, I think the first time she came to my parents' house, and we met in college, and my freshman year of college and her freshman year of college. And I invited her to my family's house, and she came, and they were in the middle of dinner, and it was probably 20 people that were there at dinner. And I explained this a little bit last week, but my family is very much into testing the limits of people's humor.
Yes.
And
so you're kind of a jostling family. It's like everything is a joke. I remember when I met your dad. Your dad is the one who really sets the tone. Your mom seems a little bit more kind of like serious and focused.
Yes.
Your dad, I mean, at any second, your dad is going to pop off with some comment, which he passed on marvelously to you, by the way. So you have that same quality. But it seems to me that that's part of the grace of having a large family is you have to have some humor, and you have to be able to laugh at yourself. And you talk about that a lot with me about, you can't take yourself too seriously. So share a little bit more about that. That's sort of a culture of your house, which makes 10 people, living together with very different personalities doable. You can't take yourselves too seriously. You have to be able to joke and laugh and make fun of yourselves. And
yes, and sometimes I do that to the point where my kids will think that, that I'm cruel, because they'll be sensitive about something or they'll be upset about something. And in a way, whenever I sort of tease them or kind of prod into that, it's basically me saying, listen, I need you to understand, is this really worth being this upset over? Or is this worth investing this much emotional resource to in the long run? Like, where's this going to take you? So I do think that my parents, especially my dad, my mom came from a totally different family dynamic. She grew up with two sisters and a younger brother, but very different family. They were like kind of an emotionally driven family. And that's sort of what the family Becky came from too. So I try to find that balance where we're not driven entirely by our emotions, where if we get upset about something or somebody steps on our toes, that it becomes, and I use the phrase all the time, like, do not make a mountain out of a molehill. And I think what that gets at is just keeping things in perspective. I'm always trying to teach my kids, and sometimes my wife, to try to keep things into proper perspective, because if you just let your emotions drive your reactions to everything, things can get wildly out of control. And I've seen that happen with the different families that I've been around. So that's one thing. I think proper perspective is a really important thing that I try to drive home with my kids.
Yeah. So in this context, what does Becky teach you?
I think Becky teaches me, there's a couple of things my wife really teaches me. One is, I think, healthy boundaries, because my wife is definitely high in things like empathy and discipline and responsibility. And admittedly, those things are very low on my list. I'm not an empathetic person. I can dig deep and try to understand.
You just laugh at it. Come cry on your shoulder and you just laugh at it.
In some ways, like, my kids will come to me and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I just hit my toe and it's bleeding like crazy. And I'll look down at it and there's like a little scratch. And my reaction is often like, somebody go get me a knife. We got to cut this thing off right now. And of course they'll freak out like, no, we're not going to do that. But it's like, I think it's because I'll say, okay, yes, I understand it probably hurts, but it doesn't have to be something that you're going to dwell on for hours, like, okay, it hurts. We'll put a Band-Aid on it and then let's, rub some dirt on it and get back in the game kind of thing. And I think,
put in some salt water. It'll be fine.
Right. Yeah. And so I think what Becky brings is she's much more gentle. Like, she's a very nurturing kind of person. She's just very empathetic. So, she brings, it's a really nice balance, I think, that she brings. And then I'm also, I'm more of like a big dreamer kind of person. And so I kind of bring that, I think, to my family, where I'm always trying to think of different projects to do. And my wife, I always joke that she has a dream shotgun that she shoots, she shoots my dreams down all the time. And what I do realize is that she's just a very responsible person. She's like, it's fine if you have an idea, but you need to be able to come to a conclusion with it and not just keep it dreaming. So I think Becky really brings a very, very nice balance to our family.
Keeps your feet on the ground.
She does.
That's what my wife does that for me too.
She's
more the realist. I'm more the idealist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. So, something else that, it's always, so I've always, like, personally, I've always been challenged by not so much the fact that you have a lot of children, because, and we'll get into this a little bit later, like, how many children you have in a family is kind of a discerning process. Like, a couple has to pray about that and has to, and be led by the Lord to the size family, because we can't see the future things that we may encounter, have to deal with, and so on and so forth. And that's why the church is, it says that we have to be in prayer with the Lord and discern and be open But being open doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to have a large family. Some people
Right.
are very open and have only 2 children, whether they try or not try. Just, the life story of a family is different for each. But you've made some really intentional decisions in the context of having a large family, so I'm going to mention 2 of them, and and there are things that really inspire me, to be honest with you. There are things that challenge me, and sort of I look at these things and I say, gosh, I have to examine myself in the light of these things. So number one is that you choose to live in a very, very small and modest sized home.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you could have 3,500, 4,000 square feet. You could have 5, 6 bedrooms, but you live in a 1,800, 1,700, 1,800 square foot house.
No, it's probably closer to 1,200, 1,300 max. Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I am serious.
Oh my gosh, I was wow. Okay, and so there's 3 bedrooms.
Correct.
And a lot of people might look at that and say, "Oh my gosh, that's terrible." I mean, the children don't have their own room,
Right.
and they don't have their own privacy. But and I mean, you're climbing on top of each other, and multiple kids sleeping in the same bed, and I wonder, like, okay, when they're teenagers, how's this going to work? But the point is you've been very intentional about that, and as I've lived, been around your family, and we've been friends forever. I go over to your house all the time, and obviously I'm not there all the time, but on one level, your kids don't know any different, and they learn a lot of really important things, like how to play together in a smaller space, how to share, how to it's different things. But I just want you to talk a little bit about sort of like your thought process and what because as an architect, you could have gone a different route, okay?
Sure.
And that's sort of related to the second thing, is that while you could have had a very robust and very, a very lucrative kind of business while you're having a large family, and that would be, you could justify that very easily, right? Got a lot of mouths to feed, got college education coming ahead and all that. But you said, no, I feel the Lord's calling me into youth ministry. So I think I'm going to make,
significantly less money.
A much more modest salary, and do ministry. And that's the decision that not just you made unilaterally, but you and Becky discerned that together.
Yeah.
Both of those decisions, and did it because you really felt it was a calling. And so I want you to talk about that.
Sure.
Those 2 things. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I'll talk about this space first. And I want to, I guess I'll kind of lay the foundation, maybe the sort of arc of the story. When I was going to graduate school for architecture, I had every aspiration to be just a really successful architect. And I've always been a very creative person. And, I'm also, like, if anybody knows the Strengths Finder thing, I'm high in self-assurance. So I have like this thing within me that's like, I can do this, and I know what's right. And I had this dream, I had this plan of being this really successful architect, and I loved it. I loved designing, and I think that I'm really good at it. And so when I was doing that, the whole path was veered towards taking over the firm that I was working for in Denver. I worked for a small residential firm that was doing just beautiful design work. And my boss was a great mentor. He worked with some world famous architects. He was mentored by some very famous architects in his life. So, I mean, this was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a future of just like greatness and awesomeness. And we were very much living the double income, no kid lifestyle in Denver, Colorado at the time. And it was, oh my gosh, just fantastic. It was fantastic. And then I met somebody who kind of flipped my perspective on its head, and taught me different things about discernment and like a prayer life, and sort of interjecting God or inviting God into the plans of my life. And so things started to change. I started to become more about, okay, is this what God wants me to do? Like, yeah, I could create maybe a life for myself that's lucrative and very comfortable. But then it was just something tugging at my heart. Like, is this what God wants? So when we came back to Pennsylvania, I started my own firm, and we were very, very dirt poor at that point, because we just kind of on a whim left Denver so that our first daughter, who was born in Denver, could come back and grow up with her cousins. And so I started my own firm, but it took like a year and a half for me to start building up a big enough client base where that was operating on its own. So we were like heavily in debt. We lived in a very small house that I renovated in Ligonier, Pennsylvania, and
I helped.
You did help, and
I did a few things.
You swung a hammer, and it was really cute. And I
reframed those windows on the inside.
That's right.
Thank you very much. Yeah, on that hot, blistery hot day. But we had those barn raisins, you know.
Oh yeah, that was a great experience. Great experience. But
it was.
I think what that started to teach me there was, we left a lot of our stuff in Denver, the furniture, a lot of our things that the person bought our condo there. And when we came back to Pennsylvania, we had nothing. And we sort of saw that, and we were like, you know what, this is actually really, we kind of like this, like not having a bunch of stuff. And the fact that we bought a small, just really narrow house on this very quaint and beautiful street in this very quaint and beautiful town, we just started to have this understanding of, we don't really need that much. We don't need that much stuff. We dropped cable. We immediately, when we came back, we just didn't even have cable. And then it started, I started volunteering at my church there, and I started working with high school students, and never in a million years thought that I would have want to do that. But at some point, God opened a door where he was like, I want you to go through that door and to go into full-time youth ministry. And I was like, seriously? Like, this is going to be probably a 60 to 70% cut in my pay, and the architecture stuff was paying off all the debt that we had to accrue by starting my own business. And but because my prayer life and everything like that was starting to develop, I was like, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to put this actually to the test. I'm going to trust, and I'm going to take that leap. And much to my surprise, I did end up getting a full-time job, got that reduced pay, and simultaneously we sold our house in town. That paid off all the debt. We moved to this tiny town of Apollo, Pennsylvania, bought a small house there, and it really just began this process of, like, almost every single decision we made, especially the big ones, we were like, what does God want us to do? And sometimes he would speak very, very clearly in miraculous ways. I could go on about that. And sometimes it was really like, well, we just have to go with our gut on this. And but that's really, discerning the small space mentality. And me as an architect love to make sure that every detail in a place has a meaning and a purpose. So in a small house, that is exponentially increased. And so I just started to really like the idea of small house living, even though our family kept growing.
Yeah, it's amazing, because just to talk about the way you design your space, I mean, obviously you have a special gift there, so you can take a space and see the potential that's there. And something I've learned from you is we waste so much space. Like, I'm amazed. I remember when your house now in Baton, I going in that kitchen, I was like, man, like, you love to cook. Like, how are you going to do this? But you did. It's like, the cabinet goes here, and the fridge is going to move here, and we have this little thing. You go to IKEA and you pull this thing, and you're always able to. And so I look in your kitchen now, and it's tight. It's tight, but there's still a lot of working space.
Yeah.
And then I remember, and this has always been the case. Like, our family is growing, your family is growing, and we'd get together, and we always needed more seats at the table, and we had to come up with creative ways when we get together and eat together. But regardless, whenever we went to your house, it always worked. It was never like, oh, there's just not enough room for us here. Sometimes we did shifts and stuff, but still, it's always been a lot of fun. One thing I wanted to share just a little bit. There's a saying in our faith about how iron sharpens iron.
Right.
This is what's really important about having fellowship and having Christian friends and brothers and sisters in our faith, because there are so many ways in which we can positively influence each other. And so I want to tell a story just kind of related to space and all of that. And so my story around our house is that every time we moved, we always got bigger. And it was a subconscious thing. It just in my mind, it was like, yeah, if you're going to move, you're going to step it up, you know? So we started out in our very first home in Grand Rapids. We've had 6 houses because we moved a lot. That's a whole other story. Maybe you can interview me on the deployment of the Therrien family around the face of the earth. But you know, so you know, we started out with just a little tiny. It's like 1,300 square foot home, maybe about the size of your house right now. And then when we bought our first house in Pennsylvania, it was probably 1,700-1,800 feet. And then we moved to another house in Latrobe, which was, somewhere around 3,000. Then we went to Denver. We took a big leap. We were up near 4,000 square feet. Came back to Pittsburgh, and we were still at that same level.
Right.
And so I was looking at my finances. We got children going to college, and I'm looking at this huge house, and all Lynn kept doing is just like, I'm so tired of taking care of so much. And I was looking at my utility bills and just paying, just lights on all over the place. And the other thing that we noticed that really was bothering us, especially as we moved here, was that our kids, they would just kind of disappear. Like they each had their own little space, even if it wasn't the room. Like I could literally sit and go through several hours of a day and not really have much of an interaction with another person in the house, and the kids especially. And as they were, growing through their teen years, I'm like, Lynn and I were like, I don't really like this. And I don't like the financial burden it is, how much I'm shelling out. And then I think about what I have to do to maintain this property, and when a new roof comes, and painting, and I was just like, oh my gosh, so, financially I was doing fine. I mean, I was very well, actually, for a person in my profession. So I wasn't at all complaining or saying, I don't make enough money for the lifestyle I want to have. It was just like, even if I had all the money in the world, it was still something I had to think about. So I had to think about. So anyway, if you'll remember, we went out for coffee this one Christmas, and I was, as I often do, griping and complaining and bemoaning my wonderful life, and just feeling I'm just like, I don't like this. And I didn't want to move. Like I did not want to. I was like, this was our 5th house. I'm like, I'm so tired, because it just I can't move again. I remember I said I can't move again, but I can't. This situation isn't working. And we were talking about just like, it'd be nice to have less space, and just So anyway, I'll never forget. You looked out across the table at me, and you asked me one question, which you're very good at doing. You ask these very pointed questions, which are always challenges, right? And you said, so what are you waiting for? I was like, I won't finish. Yeah. I had all sorts of expletives. And I was like, is that a challenge? So that began a process. And the process was, well, it started out as maybe we should just build a really small house, kind of find our dream piece of land and then build our perfect little small minimal house and have you design it and make use of every square inch. As we started down that path, we realized that it was way over our budget and our spending. So someone recommended that we just get a fixer-upper. So that's what we did. So we picked up a house that's about 1,900 square feet. And we did a major renovation, and you designed it. And
I wish we could show pictures,
Yeah,
awesome to show pictures.
That would be cool. But yeah, no, I mean, you did a phenomenal job on that, except for the fact that you misplaced the beam in the basement. So that created
that's minor.
Yeah, it's minor. We just had to figure out what to do with the vanity in the shower. But anyway, no,
it worked.
It did work, and it turned out really well. But the thing is that we cut the size of our house in half, and we cut our overall expenses, down to we cut at least a third, if not more.
Yeah.
Out 40% of our house expenditures out. We just eliminated them, and over time, of course, that's going to save us a lot of money because we're not paying interest on all that debt.
Sure.
But here was the thing that was so great about it for us is that we made the main family space really beautiful and the way we wanted it, because we wanted the kids to hang out. We wanted to be together.
Yeah.
And closer. And we have a much smaller family than you. We have, 4 kids, and now we have 2 kids in college. We have 2 living at home right now. But I'll tell you what, it's just, it's made all the difference in the world. The kids are very often, just lounging around on our IKEA couches, and and we're just together all the time. And so my point is that that's a very concrete way in which the choices that you and Becky made very intentionally, that you can have a large family and you can live in a small space. It's like it's always, well, if the Liebs can do this, why can't we do this? Like Lynn and I would go round and round. It's like, it's ridiculous. Like, we can do this. And, there have been a few little complaints along the way from the kids, like, oh, I miss the old house. It's like, oh, Lynn and I are like, we don't. We love this. This is just great. So
I think there's a couple principles that you're talking about, which, became very important to Becky and I. Number one is the importance of family space. Like, we intentionally wanted bedrooms that were very small, that were not kind of spaces where our kids would hang out. There are, I know there's a lot of different opinions on this, and some people feel very strongly that, their kids should have the privacy, they should have more privacy. And so they believe in having their kids have separate rooms. That's just not something that Becky and I subscribe to. And there's this great song that somewhere along the way I heard it years ago. It's by this band Casting Crowns. They're a Christian band, but it's called House of Their Dreams, and it specifically talks about that there's this family. It tells a story of this family that has all of these big dreams. The dad's climbing the corporate ladder, and the mom is striving to be, supermodel fitness kind of woman. But yet in their house, and they have this dream house that's so big, and everybody's got this and that and the other thing, yet they're so unhappy. And they're all in their own separate spaces, their own separate worlds most of the time. And, doing youth ministry, I see that a lot. I see that even though kids might be in the same proximity of their siblings and their parents, there's a breakdown in the bond of the family that's happening. And that is just, we wanted to actually intentionally push our kids to have to interact with each other, to interact with us, that they couldn't really go and hide somewhere. If they wanted to, they could go outside and be by themselves, but not like cooped up in a bedroom with technology in front of their face. So that is something that families have to discern for themselves, like whether that's important to them or not. And we actually felt like that was really important to us.
Well, and I think the thing is, knowing your space, there are places for if a child needs a little alone time or wants to go read, or but it's not isolating.
Right.
There's places for solitude, and you have a double lot, so you have a little bit bigger property, so the kids can go out, go outside, and you encourage your kids to go outside. We always have done the same thing. But I think you're touching on a really important point, which is the family is a place of formation, and the primary formation we need is relationships with other people. We need to learn the basic things about life, like how do we share, how do we negotiate, how do we fight, how do we fights? How do we say we're sorry, how do we forgive?
It's a daily challenge.
Yeah, right. How do we ration a limited size meal? It's not like mom necessarily makes the right quantity every single time, and how do you share a bathroom? Like your bathroom, you go into your bathroom, it's like, okay, the wall is like right here.
It's
like right here. Yep. And I'm like, and I remember
we have 6 girls. I just want to point that out.
But
Three of whom are teenagers.
it's interesting because I remember, it's like your tub. It's like right here, and your sink is like right here, in your toilet, and
Yeah.
you put that cabinet, and I'm like, where in the heck are the towels going? Like, where are the towels going? And I come back like the next time, and like, holy crap, the towels are like, there's 4 here, and there's 4 here, and it all works perfectly. It's like I would have put a picture on that space, but you very artistically and very cleverly with these cool little hooks, you turned the towels into an art and different colors. So I mean, it was like, it's brilliant. Like, so we don't think about these things, these little ways as families that we can be intentional and do things that really teach a lot of really important lessons. And the other thing too, I want to ask you about, I want to talk about, because the church tells us that we should be like, sort of, we as Catholics, as Christians, part of our teaching is to be open to life, like to receive the children that God gives us. Now, that can be interpreted as, just kind of like reproduce recklessly, right? And I don't think that that's what the church means. Or it can mean prayerfully and discerningly ask the Lord to show you the size of family that he wants you to have, trusting that he won't give you more children than you can handle. So there are some couples, and the reasons for not being able to handle those things can be they can be many things. It can be the temperaments of the household. It can be economic issues. It could be a permanent kind of state of illness or a condition that someone has. That it can be it can also be infertility, that people just can't conceive as many children as they want, or even conceive any children. So the point is the disposition and the posture. So I guess what I'm saying is that you're not a B-rated Christian if you discern that God only wants you to have 2 or 3 kids. Like, sure. I want to make that clear, because I think that sometimes we can leave that impression. The point is that every marriage is a vocation, and every vocation is going to embody the love of God in its own way. And you might be a family that has 1 child, but because you have 1 child, you can respond to God's call in your life in all sorts of other ways that a family like you that has 8 can't, right? So the important part is to be discerning and to be open and to be generous in our response to God's love. And that can happen. Sometimes God does bless families with a lot of kids, and sometimes God doesn't. I mean, people don't have a lot of kids. They have a hard time conceiving, and there's everything in between that. Right. The important thing is having that disposition and that sense of openness. So the church teaches us that we have to have that openness, but we have a culture that's very much in this population control mindset, very much concerned about the carbon footprint, very concerned about not impacting the environment in these negative ways. And it's like, it's the stated problem is always people. It's never the choices and the decisions that people make. Right. And so I think our faith tells us, hey, the planet has plenty of room for lots of people, but we have to make the right choices and the right decisions about how we build our household. So yeah,
I think the planet would be better if it had 3 billion really discerning and good souls, rather than 100,000 really awful people who don't think about that. You know what I'm saying? Like,
there's 7, isn't there like 7 billion?
But what I'm saying is, even if, like the more people I think discern what God is calling them to do, the better the world is going to be around them. They're going to make the world a better place. I think what ends up happening is that people make decisions, whether it's jobs or family size or economic decisions, whatever it might be. I think a lot of times they just make it for all the wrong reasons. And then the world ends up being less of a better place because of it. So, I mean, I'll tell you just sort of like how we discerned our family size. We never, ever in a million years set out to have 8 kids. That was never like, we were never even like we're going to have this many kids. And that was
Wasn't
never,
a goal, right?
it wasn't a thought process for us. What ended up happening is when we lived in Denver, again, because my prayer life and my discerning life was growing, we lived 4 years before we had our first daughter. And admittedly, during that 4 years, we were using contraception. My wife was on the pill. It was a carryover from her college years. And part of that was ignorance. We kind of justified doing that because it helped regulate this or that. But I mean, we found out later that there are other ways to do that. But it's just something that we did. And then somebody kind of opened our eyes to that and showed us kind of the truth about contraception and truth about, sexuality and humans and the way God designed it. And so it took us a while, but eventually we were like, all right, we're going to this too. We're not going to use the pill anymore. And we're going to use natural family planning, the symptothermal method, which is hugely scientific. I love it. It works.
It must work.
It works. That's what people say all the time.
I know. I just had to say it. No, you got 8 kids. It must work really well.
But I will tell you how it works.
So that's why I want you to speak to that.
I will.
Because people will throw that at you, and it's like, no, that's not like
right. So
you guys really did use it.
We did, and we still do. We had our first daughter, and my wife was very much into natural sort of parenting. And so she's very much into co-sleeping, ecological breastfeeding, it's called, like nursing on demand, that kind of stuff. And she discovered that the sort of science of the body, whenever you nurse on demand, all these things, when you co-sleep, it actually delays the return of your cycle. So we would have like clockwork 18 months that would go between our kids practicing that and you have to practice it. You can't just sort of like jump in and jump out. It has to be something you commit to. But it's spaced out her cycles about every 18 months after she would have a kid. And so as soon as she would get her cycle back, we would start praying again. Like, God, is this like, do you want us to have a kid? And so we usually would practice successfully natural family planning for 3 to 8 months till we discerned, okay, like this is the time. We feel like God is really, really putting on our hearts to have another child. And my wife, I could probably sneeze on her and she would conceive. She is a perfect genetic specimen, and so we would and that was every single time she would practice.
You would sneeze on her?
Yeah. No, it was way more fun than just sneezing. So
no, it was always like, well, Becky and I are going to go up into this Lake District of the Rocky Mountains. I'm like, oh, I see. It must be. Let me see. Let me count the months here. Oh, yep. It's about
something like that. No, but so
that's too much information. Sorry.
We would practice it. We would abstain whenever we were supposed to abstain, and we would do that for months at a time. And so we still do. And so each child, that would be our process. She would get her cycle back, and we'd start praying. Are we supposed to have another child? Is God putting it on our heart to have another child? And he would, and sometimes it would defy the logic of society, where it would be like, why you're making this much money as a youth minister? Like, how's this going to happen? How are you able to financially support your family? How are you able to like live with this many people in this size of a house? And it always came back to, I can't tell you how many times, my God, there's a whole other podcast about this. But every time we said yes to something that we really felt like we were prayerfully discerning that God wanted us to do, he would provide in miraculous ways to make that happen. It's unbelievable. And I'm not saying that happens maybe every time with every person, but it was a lot of affirmation for us that this was what we were supposed to do. All along the way, Becky, again, she's like a really an environmental educator, is what she spent most of her time in Denver doing, so we're very much aware of our carbon footprint. So for the longest time, up until maybe 2 years ago, we only had one car. We recycled.
And that's by choice, not.
Yeah, right. By choice.
You decided that in principle you wanted one car.
Yep.
Again, that was another one of those things that was like, geez, Pete, we have like 3 cars. Like,
yeah. Right. And then whenever we did get a second car, when we did get a second car, it's a very fuel efficient, commuter kind of car for me to go back and forth to work. But we recycle everything, we compost everything, we live in a very small house. We have a Nest, that's set on the little eco settings, and so we're very much aware of our responsibility to be good stewards of what we have and God's creation. So I would probably say with a lot of confidence that my carbon footprint with 8 children is probably less than many families who have 0 to 2 kids, and that I'm not bragging about that. I'm just saying, like, you can be open to these kinds of things like we were, and God was definitely calling our family to have this many kids, and still be very responsible in every sort of way.
Yeah. What I hear in all of this, and I think kind of by way of summary, is just that you chose to allow your family to grow, while you also made very, very free choices to make your property less, which is just counterintuitive. Like everybody is doing just the opposite in our culture today. They're smaller families, more property, more stuff. But what's interesting is that you've exercised choice in this. This has all been intentional, not accidental. I think sometimes people say, well, they just can't control themselves, or they're poor, he's not.
I always tell people my wife is really hot, so that helps.
You're not climbing the ladder of success and trying to accumulate more. Like, you made the choice to live with less while your family is growing. It's such a sign of contradiction to our culture, and it's awesome. And it challenges us to realize it's like the greatest resource that we have as people, is people. And the family is where we form those people to become the responsible, giving, loving, sharing people that the world needs. And by creating that kind of environment, you're creating the conditions for the possibility for your children to grow up to be just like you, that is generous towards people, but willing to make sacrifices around material things, really discerning what do we really need in order to thrive and flourish versus what I might want to have, which is not necessarily necessary or even related in any way to my happiness. In fact, it's probably undermining that in some way. And I think it's powerful. I think that, again, it's not a question, there's not a metric. It's not. What I want to highlight and feature in this, and why I wanted to do this topic, is because it was a prayerful discernment on your part. And I'll reiterate, God's going to lead each family differently. What's important is that the witness that we give to the world is that, it is about the choices that we make, and God will lead us to the choices we need to make in order for our family to make the contribution to society and to the world that God would like to see us make. And so in your case, it's a large family in a small space, and it's a powerful witness. But to think with those kind of metrics or those kind of calculations, like, we can live with less, and yet we can make more room. John Paul II always said, we need to make more room for people. And the irony of it is that you have made more room for people by precisely shrinking the size of your space.
It seems to defy logic.
It's a paradox, but there's a beautiful truth in it, and I hope that those who are listening will think about this and let their mind, so you are being ecologically responsible on so many levels. You are attending to the good of our population. It's a false kind of ideology to say we just need kind of like fewer people so that everybody has more stuff. Like, that's not the right calculus. The right calculus is that we need way more love and intentionality around how we cultivate human relationships, because we are our greatest resource to the planet and to each other. If we form ourselves as families within the context of love and sharing and respect and sacrifice and all these great Christian virtues, and all your kids, they're going to grow up and they're going to have their own families, or some of them might have religious vocations or whatever. You never know. But the point is that there's these 8 wonderful human beings. And I mean, like, you probably have this experience where, I have this experience. I walk in your house and it's like, which Lieb would we get rid of? I mean, they're all so dang cute. I mean, every single one of them, and they're all so different. Of course, I feel that way about my own family too, of course. But like our story is we lost one of our children, and so we have 5. But it's like you look at each of your kids, whether you have 2 kids, whether you have 12, or I mean, I know families with 21 kids. I knew one family with 21 kids, and you think, oh my gosh, But you look at them and you see all the love, and you're like, they do it. And not only do they do it, but they thrive and they flourish as they do this. And you look around and you're like, which one would you say, yeah,
right,
I could have done without that one. So the point is that God has a different sort of like way of seeing this.
Sure. I would just love to reiterate one point, and you're touching on it, but maybe 2 points. One, I think I think people have to really carefully consider what is important to them, and that's why I'm saying we weren't always of this mindset. Like, I was very much a worldly pursuer. I wanted this lifestyle of success, financial success, career success, material success. I wanted that. And, but then again, I saw the witness of other people that were very important to me, people whose lives I kind of saw and I wanted to mimic, because they had things that I didn't have. They had their level of fulfillment, their level of self-confidence, their hope, all of these things. I was like, I want that. And then as I learned how they got those things, that's really what shifted my perspective and my priorities, what I thought was really important. So, it was that. What is important to you, number one? And then are you willing to make the changes or the sacrifices necessary to sometimes, to make that happen? And that was the second part of my process was, okay, I can have these great things that I'm shooting for, but am I really willing to jump off of the cliff and trust and, that everything is going to work out? And by the grace of God, I was able to do that. And again, it has been a wonderful, it's not perfect. But I do think that we do try our best to live happily. Like, we try to be a family that lives joyfully, not in a false joy, but in a real kind of joyful way. And I think that's one thing that I would love to see families, whether they have 0 kids, whether they have 2 kids, whether they have 12 kids, is just families that are really striving to incorporate joy into their family. I think if you can live within the family, whatever size it might be, if you can do that well, then the world would be transformed by that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you're right on there. Again, I just want to reiterate this point too. It's just, it is a matter of discernment. It's prayerfully, asking the Lord and seeking the Lord's guidance as you did. That's the key. It's not, we're not saying anything like more is better, but it's the sense of freedom out of which, and the love out of which, those kinds of discernments. We know another family, McAllen family. We were in Austria with them, and they were just starting out when we met them. They have I think they're at 8 or 10 now too. And, Josh is a hugely successful broker of some kind. He does very well. And they have a huge family, and they just did this little filming thing at Easter, and they were decorating Easter egg. And it was like, they have this huge, gorgeous, massive kitchen. It's just beautiful. And they're all on this huge island, But I mean, it was another incarnational reality of, of the witness of a Christian family. And so it's like, the question isn't how much you make or don't make. The question isn't how many kids you have or don't have. The issue is do you see marriage as a vocation? Do you see family as a vocation, as a calling? and to discern that, and then invest everything you have into whatever it is that God leads you to, and to pour yourself out in that, and then live that life joyfully. That's really what family life is all about, and it's something I just think the world needs.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing that makes me think of is, and my wife and I didn't discover this until maybe 5 years ago, but I think there's a statistic that a lot of marriages around year 20 is when they like start to collapse and dissolve. And which to me for a long time, I was like, how can you be with somebody for 20 years and then feel like this is not for me? And what I did discover, and this is through my own experience, is that a lot of times, especially people that have children, the parents can invest all of their time and energy and effort into those kids, getting them to sports and being involved in this and that. And they totally forget that their primary investment should be in that person that they professed vows to.
Yeah.
And when Becky and I discovered that, and we started making intentional time for each other once, twice a month, having these date nights where we got away from the family, it has infinitely improved our marriage and infinitely improved how we are parents to our children. And that is so something that I am so in people's face about. Like, you have to invest in your spouse. Like, I know the temptation is just to dive into your kids and do that, but it's never a great scenario whenever after 20 years and the kids are gone and you look at your spouse and you're like, I don't even know who you are. Like, I haven't communicated well with you for the last 20 years. So
yeah. No, I mean, it's awesome. You're making me think of something my dad always said to us, which was, he used to say to me, Michael, your number one priority is Lynn. You have to put her first, and then before the kids, which seems counterintuitive. Right. And then he would say, and then together as a couple, your number one priority is your children. And that always just, the more I've lived married life, the more sense that really makes me. It's just so true. But even more, I think, profound, what he said to me was most of what your children are going to learn, they're going to learn by how you and Lynn love each other. Like, you can lecture and talk to and give life lessons to your kids until the cows come home. Most of what they're going to learn about being a decent human being, they're going to learn by how mom and dad love each other. That's the nursery, right, within which children mature and grow up. They watch. Yep. And so if you're at it all the time with each other, if you don't respect each other, if you don't honor one another, and so it makes it simpler, actually. It's like, if I can focus on how well I love and sacrifice for this woman, or, Becky, it's you, yeah. Right. That's the school. That's the classroom that the children are in. That's what they're watching. That's what they're paying attention to. That's what they're learning. Amen. And then I just think I bet you if you did sociological study, you would see this, that children grow up to be well-adjusted, healthy adults if they grew up in a home where mom and dad really loved each other. But so often that marriage gets torn apart because, like you said, you're running every direction to try to satisfy every whim that your child wants, and this activity and that activity and this sport and this, that, and everything else. Yeah. But so anyhow, that's a good place to end. I think that's a great place to end. Yeah. We've solved the problem of dissolving marriages. Yeah, right. Not quite. Yeah. Well, anyhow, thanks for opening up and sharing so much about your family. A lot of people think things to themselves and never verbalize it. And I thought to myself, we might as well just put you right out there and say, talk about this, because again, it's not that everybody has to do the exact same thing. That's not the point. The point is that you've witnessed in a particular way, and it's been a beautiful testimony to me. It's one of the reasons why I consider you one of my closest friends, is because you've always strived. What's the word? Stroved. You've always run the good race and try to be intentional about how you incorporate your faith into your life very practically as a family. And we do the same thing. And I know that I'm sure we've rubbed off on you in similar ways. Yeah. So
that's a whole
anyhow.
other podcast.
Yeah. It'll be
All
shorter
right.
though, right? Okay. All right. All right.
great,
Well,
man.
hey, we'll see you soon, and we'll be back next week with solid ground
For more.
for more.
Fantastic.
All right. Yep.
See you, man.
Hey, see ya.